Okay, so we're going to look at Judges chapter 7. Last time, when we were looking over in chapter 6, Gideon comes across pretty timid, doesn't he? He doesn't have much confidence in himself, but he is, maybe not ingenious is the right word, but he does things a little differently than other people going up to the caves and hiding out. He's in the wine vat, trying to thresh out his wheat, trying to save it from being taken away from him. But when God comes to him, he does ask God for several signs, including the 2 times with the fleece, and was God really going to be there for him? And so now as we open up here in chapter 7, it's almost as if God's saying, if you want proof beyond a shadow of a doubt, he's going to bring Gideon's vast army down to nothing. And he's going to do this because, as we were talking earlier in Pew Packers, to instill some confidence in Gideon. In verses 1 through 3, let's look at this starting there in verse 1 through 3. Let's read it out loud, and then we'll dive into that. It starts off with, then Jerubbaal, that is Gideon. And why is his name Jerubbaal now? His father renamed him, right, because of that situation. And all the people who were with him rose early and camped beside the spring of Harod, and the camp of Midian was on the north side of them by the hill of Moreh in the valley. The Lord said to Gideon, the people who are with you are too many for me to give Midian into their hands. For Israel would become boastful, saying, my own power has delivered me. Now therefore come, proclaim in the hearing of all the people, saying, whoever is afraid and trembling, let him return and depart from Mount Gilead. So 22,000 people returned, but 10,000 remained. Interesting. So I wonder if Gideon was thinking, hang on, Lord, of course the people are going to be fearful. If you're going to go to war, you knew you were going to go to war. Would that scare you? Remember when I got the phone call, that scared me. I didn't want to go over there to Afghanistan, but I went. Well, I had to go. I didn't have a choice. But now God's saying, all right, give these folks a choice if they want to go or not. If you go to war, you might die, but if you want to go home, you can. And 22,000. So now they got 10,000. We don't know how many they're going up against, but the text tells us that the camels were as many as the sand on the shore. And as many people there, that are stars in the sky, but they're too numerous to count. So we're talking 50, 60, 100, some guess 100,000, and you got 10,000 men. But maybe Gideon's thinking, I've got 10,000, we can still do this. So, verses 4 through 8, 10,000 men, the Lord said to Gideon, the people are still too many. Bring them down to the water, and I will test them for you there. Therefore it shall be that he of whom I say to you, this one shall go with you, he shall go with you. But every one of whom I say to you, this one shall not go with you, he shall not go. So he brought the people down to the water, and the Lord said to Gideon, you shall separate everyone who laps the water with his tongue as a dog laps, as well as everyone who kneels to drink. Now the number of those who lapped, putting their hand to their mouth, was 300 men. But all the rest of the people kneeled to drink water. The Lord said to Gideon, I will deliver you with the 300 men who lapped, and will give the Midianites into your hands, so let all the other people go, each man to his home. So 300 men took the people's provisions and their trumpets into their hands, and Gideon sent all the other men of Israel, each to his tent, but retained the 300 men. And the camp of Midian was but below him in the valley. 300 men. Gideon was probably thinking, well, I saw the movie 300, and if they could get by, so can I, right? All right. But they almost won. There's hope, right? There's hope. Poor Gideon. If you were leading 300 men against tens of thousands, and you knew God was with you, how scared would you be? Depends on how well you know God, how much confidence and trust you have in him. See, the previous chapter, Gideon was testing God a lot. I was saying, will you be with me? Will you be with me? So now God's saying, look, I want to make sure you know I'll be with you. I want to whittle your army down to 300. Go fight. I'll be with you. You'll see. And after this, Gideon's confidence will go up.
The next chapter says of Midian, 120,000 fell.
That's right.
Include the other.
That's right. That's right. I forgot. 120. That's over. You got quite a few.
One of the two armies, so it doesn't really say the other.
So I remember reading, people were saying 135,000 were how many they had, but don't know for certain.
Yes, because above that, they said there's still 15,000.
So, no, you're all right. No, you're right. I'm glad you pointed that out. So here's Gideon. He's got the 300 men. In verse 9, that same night, it came about that the Lord said to him, arise, go down against the camp, for I have given it into your hands. But if you are afraid to go down, go with Purah, your servant, down to the camp, and you will hear what they say. And afterward your hands will be strengthened, that you may go down against the camp. So he went with Purah, his servant, down to the outposts of the army that was in the camp. Now the Midianites and the Amalekites and all the sons of the east were lying in the valley, as numerous as locusts, and their camels were without number, as numerous as the sand on the seashore. When Gideon came, behold, a man was relating a dream to his friend, and he said, behold, I had a dream. A loaf of barley bread was tumbling into the camp of Midian, and it came to the tent and struck it so that it fell, and it turned it upside down so that the tent lay flat. His friend replied, this is nothing less than the sword of Gideon, the son of Joash, a man of Israel. God has given Midian and all the camp into his hand. Now, that's an interesting dream, and that's an interesting interpretation. So you see a loaf of bread coming down the hill, it strikes the tent, it turns upside down and falls flat, and your interpretation is that Gideon is going to strike and beat this army. Why would they interpret it like that? Well, and it was really cheap. Well, the barley bread is a poor man's bread, and because you ever had it pretty bitter, and Israel doesn't have much. They've been oppressed. So I guess he saw that, and he recognized that's a reference to Israel, because how powerful is Israel? It's like, have you ever been hit with a loaf of bread? I have been my siblings. I got hit with a loaf. Does it hurt? It's not going to hurt unless you got that real thick sourdough bread, I guess. But it's bread. It's not going to hurt. But you got this loaf of bread come down, it hits a tent and falls flat. But as Tim was saying, the Jedi mind trick, God has probably already implanted in their minds some fear there and influenced them into thinking they're going to lose. Like we were talking about just this past week, attitude equals altitude. Or as Henry Ford said, if you think you're right if you think you can or you think you can't, you are right. Because your attitude will drive you toward either way you're thinking. And if you think you're going to lose the war, and the whole army is already thinking that, or it's spreading throughout, they're already in a failing state. So things are looking better. And this did encourage Gideon, verse 15. When Gideon heard the account of the dream and its interpretation, he bowed in worship. That is a great attitude. He's showing there great confidence at that point. He returned to the camp of Israel and said, arise, for the Lord has given the camp of Midian into your hands. He divided the 300 men into 3 companies, and he put trumpets and empty pitchers into the hands of all of them, with torches inside the pitchers. He said to them, look at me and do likewise. And behold, when I come to the outskirts of the camp, do as I do. When I and all who are with me blow the trumpet, then you also blow the trumpets all around the camp and say, for the Lord and for Gideon.
Who's getting the big head now?
Well, I think he says for the Lord and for Gideon to put it into the mind. It's already in the minds of the Midianites that God's sending Gideon. He probably wants them to hear that name. Let that fear well up in them. And Gideon's sounding pretty confident in this already. But we do know he does have an arrogant problem later on, so that could be that as well. So they gather around. They got three groups. They go around the whole camp. All they have is their torch. They may have weapons, who knows? But we know they got the torch, the pitcher to put the torch in, and the trumpet. 300 men. Now, why the trumpets? Because they already had those. Why the trumpet? I think I had that verse in here somewhere. Okay, cast fear. Numbers chapter 10, verses 9 and 10. God says, when you go to war in your land against the adversary who attacks you, then you shall sound an alarm with the trumpets, that you may be remembered before the Lord your God, and be saved from your enemies. Also, in the day of your gladness, and in the appointed feast, and on the first day of your months, you shall blow the trumpets over the burnt offerings, and over the sacrifices of your peace offerings, and they shall be a reminder of you before the Lord. I am the Lord your God. So the trumpet, you could say, was his way of saying, look, you do this, and I will be with you. Blow the trumpet before you go to war, and I'll remember you. Well, maybe it was. I don't have to go back and look at Numbers, but he does tell them when they go to war to blow the trumpets. So they're blowing the trumpets. God's going to be with them. And did you ever watch that TV show, Lost? Remember that show, Lost? There was a scene where the people who are on this island, their plane crashed there, but there's some other people out there in the island, so they go out there looking for them, this group. And one guy meets them, and he tells them, you guys need to leave and get off this island right now. You need to leave. And they begin to have some words with him. They're a little upset. They want to know who these other people are. He says, no, you need to leave. And then torches light up in the jungle all around them. So they get a little nervous, thinking they're outnumbered, and they leave. But it was only a few people. But just seeing the torches lit made them think there were more people there than there really was. But here you are, if you're the Midianites and Amalekites and all those from the east, and you look up on the valley ridge and you see torches all around, and then you hear the trumpets, and you hear all this shouting, and you've already got some guys spreading the rumor about these dreams, you get scared. They begin to run off. And in the confusion, what does God have them do? They're killing each other. And then Gideon rallies the rest of the troops that were off on the side, the not 300 people. They go after them. Others from Ephraim and other places come up after them, and they wipe them out. Not wipe them out, but they kill off quite a few of them, kill their leaders, and they are successful. God was with them. But isn't it interesting that God would strip the army all the way down to 300? I want us to get into Gideon's shoes here for a moment. How would that make you feel? I mean, you've already went through chapter 6 and all those situations there with the fleece and the pulling down the altars and other matters with the angel of the Lord. And now you're here. You have a big army, but it's not bigger than the army you're going against. And God whittles it down and whittles it down, and he pulls everything away. Why does he do that? Prove his power? Well, to show, so that Israel doesn't boast in themselves. That's right. They're to rely on God. For us today, how alarmed do we get when our strengths are stripped away? Maybe the numbers of the congregation go down, or the funds for the congregation go down, or something happens and we start to feel like, well, all of our ability to get things done are gone. We don't have them anymore. We lost our camera. Oh no, the audio system went down. We can't lead songs. And all these, whatever it might happen, when all those things begin to fall apart, I think sometimes God may strip things away from us to remind us to rely on him. What if you went blind? I always wondered about that. As I read and study, what if I go blind? How am I, man, I'd have to listen to the audio of the Bible and not read at all. How am I going to read all those commentaries? Jenny is not going to do it for me forever. So what am I going to do? Well, I'd get by. I just keep on keeping on, I hope. But sometimes God does take things away from us. We were talking about Samson. We'll be getting to him later on. Does Samson get arrogant there toward the end? What is God? God allows that hair to be taken away. I know some don't think he did, but the hair gets taken away. The ability gets taken away, and he has to rely on who? God. And he does say a prayer there at the end. And God gives him that power without the hair. Think of Peter. Did Peter have a quick mouth and maybe a little bit of pride? He did. Jesus stripped that pride away, but he left the mouthpiece. And then you have Paul. He had a lot of knowledge, but he also had a lot of pride. And we went through that. Did God take that pride away? He did. But he left the knowledge to push him in the right direction. Sometimes certain things in our lives might be getting in the way of our spiritual growth. We may be really good at whatever business. We may be really good at doing this, that, or the other, but those things might be hindering our spiritual growth. So sometimes God may take those things away from us to wake us up to rely on him. Solomon also with the pride. And I don't think unfortunately, I don't think he made it back. Pride says, I can do it. But humility says, I can do all things through him who strengthens me. Is to put our focus back on the Lord. And I think that's what God is doing there for Gideon, to focus on him. Don't put your trust in all these things. If I'm with you, you can do it. If you know I'm with you, read the word. I'm not saying that we can go out there and win actual wars with 300. We have to know what God's will is, what he wants us to do. Does he want us to go out and be a light unto the world? Or be salt? Yes. And if we go out there and we are trying to do that, he will pave the ways for us. It won't be easy, but he'll provide the opportunities. If we pray fervently for it, if we strive to do it, we prepare ourselves with the full armor of God, putting it on, and get out there and make ourselves available, he will provide. He will provide, but we have to believe that he will. Because if you ask while doubting, what will happen? You're not going to listen. Don't doubt. You have to ask without doubting. You have to read, know the truth, and bring it into your heart. Any other comments or questions on Gideon here in chapter 7? How you are before God. That's right. Very good point. If you didn't catch that online, that there in the Beatitudes, it's all about your heart before the Lord, being humble, being poor in spirit, and having a merciful heart, and understanding who you are before God before you can get to that point of being the kind of light, kind of salt that God wants us to be before this world. Good comment. Or when they were in the promised land, and they quickly forgot that. And
that's their translation of Joshua.
And I
Israel at its highest.
And I think you're right. In Judges, you just see this slow downhill going as they get worse and worse and worse. And it just falls apart. It shows they can't do it. And then here comes the Kings. Same thing. Can't do it. But in Christ, we can. That's the ultimate goal. Where they're headed, where God's headed. But he still wants them to see, to have faith in him. It's always about faith in him. But they lose it so quickly. We'll see that happen to Gideon. We'll see it happen to many others, where everyone did what was right in their own eyes rather than consider God in these matters. And it's sad, but it is a good book that we need to consistently remember, especially in our day and age, things going on, to remember that this can also easily happen to us.